I'm not a fan of the application which has gone in for Marsh Lane. I've said I'll oppose it, and I'm working with the local groups up there to oppose it. It's gone in so I imagine everybody knows because it's been in Derbyshire Times, but for anybody who doesn't, there's an application to do the first stage of fracking at Danesmoor Lane, which is just outside Marsh Lane. It's between Marsh Lane and Colaston. It is an old agricultural land which INEOS, a company, has come and said they want to frack on. INEOS does not have a track record of fracking in this country. Not many people do, but INEOS do not have one either. I do not think that's the right application in the right place at the right time. I think all of the things which will be associated with fracking, lots of traffic movements, lots of noise pollution, some air pollution, all are wholly inappropriate for that area. I'm particularly concerned about the traffic movements. There's going to be some big lorries coming through, and they either have to come through the middle of Eckington, which I think is bad for Eckington, or they have to come down Dyche Lane in Colaston. And if any of you have gone down Dyche Lane, there's a garden centre on Dyche Lane, if any of you have gone down there, it does not work for high HGV lorries because they have to go down to the bottom, they have to turn around the mini roundabout, and then the road is really, really small there, and it's the main Eckington road is really small. So it's a bad idea. I'm going to oppose it. I'm going to write my own objections to it. I'm going to put my own objections in publicly. Now, there is a wider discussion about fracking which needs to be had. I'm not opposed in principle, and I've said this to the guys up there, I'm not opposed in principle to new forms of energy production, but I think that you have to have the consent of the public as a whole, and I don't think the public as a whole are happy with fracking at the moment. So my personal preference would be, there are two sites for fracking which went ahead years ago. I can tune this up, Ross. Two sites for fracking which went ahead years ago. One is in Skipton and one is near Blackpool. They got stopped a few years ago because of earthquake worries. I think if we are going to try fracking in this country, my personal view is we should let those happen. We should see what happens up there, and then people can decide whether or not it's a good idea. But the Marsh Lane application, I think, is a bad idea and shouldn't happen. Ross?
If there was to be a vote in Parliament on fracking,
yes,
and banning it in particular, how would you vote?
I would not vote to ban fracking. I would not vote to ban fracking for this reason. I strongly believe that people should have the right to decide for themselves over this, and if there are communities around this country that want fracking, they should be allowed to do that. We are choosing, or I think we're choosing as an area here, that we don't want fracking at this moment, because I think there will be a tidal wave of objections to this application that goes into Derbyshire County Council. I think that should be recognised, but I'm not going to go around and tell other communities around the country whether they want them or not.
How can the communities decide whether they want fracking or not? Because like in Lancashire, for example, where the council there voted against having fracking and then they were overruled by the Secretary of State, how can communities decide whether they want fracking or not? Because there's no scope in the planning regulations for them to actually stop it. You know, if they elect representatives like they did in Lancashire and then representatives then voted against it, for them to then be overruled by the Secretary of State, there is no let's see what public opinion is. Actually, the government policy is driving fracking through. There is no scope for the public to have their say on fracking.
Well, I'm not sure that's true, but you are right in part that the reality is that the government is pro-fracking. I think it's part of grown-up politics that sometimes you can disagree with your own party on this. I disagree with fracking in my area. I've given you my view of fracking as a whole. Government is pro-fracking. I don't think they've hidden that. I think anybody who wanted to vote against this government will have voted against this government 8 weeks ago, and they could have done 2 years ago and all the rest of it. Jeremy Corbyn put forward a very compelling case against fracking, as indeed did every other party. So I think the government can take from that they are allowed to be pro-fracking because they put that forward very clearly in their manifesto. In fact, they said they would go even further on fracking, so I don't think we can be too critical of the government on it. But there is a democratic process, and those democratic processes are messy and difficult, and they have tensions, and sometimes one contradicts the other. My view is that communities like Derbyshire County Council or Lancashire County Council should put in place local plans which are as strict or as otherwise on fracking as they're able to be within the guidelines. That will then, from that, will follow whether or not people can apply or not and be successful. The Secretary of State can only overrule on the basis of the law, and then they will move forward on that basis. But if there is really a groundswell against fracking across this country, there will be manifest opportunities for people to object on that basis. I'm going to serve you and I'll continue.
No, so I just was interested in the fracking bit.
Yeah.
I didn't come about that, but I happen to know a bit about the Egdon Resources Company in Lincoln. And it just seems to me that we'll either have to decide whether you want fracking or not, and then get on with it. Because otherwise you're going to get companies who just, they got an application about 18 months ago. And then the local, although it's totally against government policy to deny it, they keep going on, they keep go backwards and forwards to put another application in. It's pretty soon companies are just going to say, well, it's just, and the problems.
There is always a tension within democracy about that, because either you drive something through and then you get the kind of difficulties and challenges and in some places resentment around that, or you allow these kind of messy processes to happen.
But fracking's been going all over the world. It's in America. The only reason America stopped it is because oil becomes so cheap. It's not worth them doing the fracking.
And that's the discussion that needs to be had. America, admittedly on a series of regulations that I'm not that keen on, some of the things that are happening in America on fracking, not great. But America has shown that if you do go in for large-scale fracking, you can reduce energy prices. The country as a whole needs to have that debate.
They're not getting any earthquakes, are they?
No, but they're getting quite a lot of problems. I mean, problems in Louisiana and places like that. So that's the debate that needs to be had around fracking. But ultimately, there are lots of these big infrastructure projects which are slowed down by democracy. But I wouldn't want it the other way, because we've always, Heathrow's a prime example where people go, oh, we've been messing around with Heathrow for 15 years, and look, Singapore built it in 6 years. Singapore did build it in 6 years or whatever, but Singapore isn't a democracy, and that's the kind of what you get when you are a democracy.
Well, you get things done.
You do, but you have to. I'm not sure I would. I'm not sure I would give up the democratic process. But this is how democracy works, and I think we have to know that. So, Sir, and I'll come to you.
You say you would vote in favour of fracking at a government vote.
I said I wouldn't vote to ban it. Yeah.
Well,
not
politicians' way of saying what I'm just saying.
You're probably right. See, I'm getting used to being in Westminster already.
Could I ask you the direct question?
Yeah.
If you are prepared to vote in favour of fracking, okay, what are the benefits of fracking to people who live locally around here?
Well, I'm not convinced by fracking myself, so
if you're going to vote for it,
well, for the reason I said, in that I believe in localism. Now, Ross has just taken me to task a little bit about localism, and that's fair enough. But I believe in localism as a principle. I believe that local communities should have the opportunity to make decisions for themselves. So I'm going to vote for quite a bit in the future. I might not agree with it, but I don't believe in banning things. As a principle, I don't like it. So I'm going to vote for stuff I might not personally like or I have a personal view on, but I'm going to let local communities make those decisions.
So what you're basically saying is that you know something about fracking, but you're not prepared to say what the clear benefits are for the local community?
No. I'm saying there's two separate things. One, principle. As a principle, will I as a Member of Parliament sometimes vote for things which I am not personally keen on, because I believe that the government or the state should allow those things to happen if local communities want them to happen? Yes, I will. I will let decisions be taken by local communities whether I agree with them or not. So that's localism, I agree with that. On fracking myself, I'm not an expert on fracking, so hands up. If you've got a pro-fracker in the room, the pro-fracker would say it brings down energy prices. It's not massively intrusive. After the first putting of the rig there, once the rig's gone in 3 months, after the first 3 months, that fracking would occur without a great deal of impact on local community. That's the kind of argument they would make. The anti-fracker would reject all of those, and I'm concerned about
Could
fracking.
I interrupt and point out that what you are saying in favour of fracking is exactly what INEOS and the fracking companies say. All the politicians that I've heard, all the quotes that they make about the benefits of fracking are what the companies like INEOS are putting out. I have not heard politicians who say, I've looked at both sides of the story. I've looked at the reasons why, but I've also looked at the reasons why not. And it's what the fracking companies don't tell you that is the crux of the whole thing. Because what they don't tell you are the enormous disadvantages, the health problems, etc. I could go on for hours. But what they don't tell you is all about that. And unfortunately, politicians are making decisions based on people who are just out to make money and profits and don't care a jot about the people that they're upsetting, the environment, the way. We mentioned Eckington. the planning application for that includes, over a short period, comparatively short period of time, something like 14,400 journeys, right, including 35 plus ton heavy goods vehicles,
Absolutely.
right, on virtually a daily basis.
Absolutely, and that's why I oppose it. So I agree with you on that point.
Yeah, I mean, come on, let's cut the politicians' talk out. You know, at the end of the day, some of us are very, very passionate about the way that it's going to damage. And all that we're saying is we care about communities. Right? We care about people's livelihoods. Ineos and Co. care about profit.
As companies do.
Jim Radcliffe, the owner of Ineos, it's just been announced, is now worth a personal fortune of 7.5 billion.
Yeah.
I wonder what good that could do the NHS, etc. at the moment.
And you've heard me being. I've been very clear tonight. I have tried not to make a politician's answer. I oppose the fracking in Marsh Lane. I oppose the exploratory drilling in Marsh Lane. I hope it doesn't happen. I will work with the local community to stop it happening. I will be objecting through the planning process to that occurring.
With due respect, Lee, the people who make the decisions are national politicians.
Absolutely. But in this country,
Right?
national
sir, politicians are basing their views based on what Ineos tell them.
Well, if that, but I think we have to be. I will let the national government make that argument, but I think there are two things I would say. One, we have due process in this country. We have rule of law, and we will only be able to do this if it follows the rules and the processes and the guidelines and legislation is put down. So there's a huge process that needs to go through on this fracking application before it gets anywhere, and I hope we can stop it at some point in that process. So that's the first thing I would say. But I suppose the argument back to you, sir, and it's not me that's making it, but I will play devil's advocate for a minute, is if that was the truth, and there's probably something in what you say, if that was the truth, around it's all just about money, it's all just about the rest of it, then they wouldn't have put a moratorium on it 5 years ago. They would have just got on with it 5 years ago. Now, the fact that there's a 5-year moratorium since 2012, 2013 in Lancashire suggests to me that people are thinking about this a little bit more than the way you've described it. So, you have to sort of, you can criticise politicians when they don't do things, but I think you probably also have to give a little bit of credit to them. They saw those earthquakes, they realised there's a problem, they've stopped it, they're now thinking of starting it again. But if you wanted to just give business a load of money, you wouldn't have stopped them from doing all that work for 5 years. So that's fracking. Anybody got any other questions? Sir?
Regarding this fracking.
Yeah.
Why?
See, I'm not going to get off.
Why not a traditional oil drill? We used to have one in this region.
Yeah.
We used to have one in this. So if there's oil down there, why not just do straight down and tap into it?
Yeah.
Oil well nurseries, where are they? Tip shell. So there's oil in that region. So if they could find oil, why not do it the traditional way? Go down and extract it that way.
But would everybody like an oil well?
Well, it's only one structure, isn't it?
But,
What, you're going to have it fracking, you're going to have oil.
But as I understand it, the particular field which has been put forward for fracking near Marsh Lane, Bramley-Moor Lane side, that was actually drilled for oil in the 80s to have a look to see whether there is any oil that could be extracted, because there is already a shaft or excavation or whatever it is you call, which has been capped off in 85, 86. So they tried it and it wasn't viable. So, but yeah, I'll let people debate exactly what they do with that one. Sarah.
What's your position on the main drilling supplier for fracking being in your constituency?
This is Marriotts at Danesmoor. I'm a Tory. I believe people who are legitimately operating within the law should be allowed to operate within the law. Marriotts are operating within the law. They're a commercial enterprise. They should be allowed to do that. I'm not a big fan of what's going on down Danesmoor. I believe in the legitimate right to protest. I think there's some pretty sharp stuff going on down there, and I would be.
So what's your position on the amount of taxpayers' money that's being used by Derbyshire Police Force to police, on occasions, 12 peaceful protesters, and at the last count between 20 and 30 fully riot-geared up police officers on, as I understand it, overtime payments in our county?
Yeah, I mean, I think all public budgets are under pressure. I would prefer we weren't spending a load of money down there, so I'd encourage all the protesters to go home.
That is the answer.
And that is a politician's answer.
No, it's not.
Well, it's true.